I skipped my 6:30 shift again. The alarm on my phone went off 3 times before I swiped it dead and rolled over in the narrow dorm bed. Jeff was already awake across the room, sitting up with his laptop balanced on his knees, scrolling through something that made his face glow blue in the early light. He didn't say anything. He'd stopped saying anything about my shifts 2 weeks ago. I stayed in bed until the guilt got sharper than the comfort, then dragged myself upright and looked for clean clothes. There weren't any. I pulled on yesterday's jeans and the least wrinkled employee shirt I could find on the floor. The dorm room was 8 feet wide and smelled like old socks and the pine air freshener Jeff had given up replacing. 2 beds, 2 dressers, 1 window that looked out at the employee path and the back of Old Faithful Inn. I'd been living here since May. My older brother told me a summer in Yellowstone would straighten me out. So far, it had mostly taught me how to sleep through breakfast prep. I grabbed the ramen pot from my desk. It had been sitting there for 3 days with dried noodles crusted to the bottom. If Deborah came looking for me, I wanted to at least look like I'd been doing something. The sink was in the corner of the room, a shallow basin with a single faucet that usually ran cold enough to hurt. I turned the hot water on and shoved the pot under the stream. The water came out too hot to touch. I yanked my hand back and watched steam curl off the surface of the pot. The employee housing had been complaining for 2 weeks that the boilers barely worked, that showers ran cold by 7 in the morning, that you had to let the tap run for 5 minutes just to get lukewarm. Now the water was hot enough to scald. It smelled wrong too. Pennies and sulfur and whetstone, like something mineral dissolving in the heat. Jeff, does this water smell weird to you? He looked up from his laptop. Everything here smells weird. It's a volcano with gift shops. I let the pot fill, watching the dried ramen soften and lift in the boiling water. The smell got stronger. My eyes watered. I shut the faucet off. The drain coughed once, a wet choking sound, and spat something up into the sink. A clump of gray hair. It sat in the bottom of the pot, tangled around pine needles and wrapped in a white crusty ring of mineral deposit. The hair was long, matted, the kind of gray that came from age or dirt or both. The pine needles were black with rot. "What the hell?" I said. Jeff got up and leaned over my shoulder. He looked at the clump, then at me, then laughed. "Dude, that's disgusting." "Where did it come from?" "The pipes. The whole upper geyser basin is basically a rotten plumbing system under a national park. You've got superheated water running through cracks in the ground, dissolving everything it touches. Hair, dirt, dead animals. Whatever falls in, it all goes somewhere." I poked at the clump with a fork. The hair moved in one piece, stiff and sealed together by the white crust. The mineral deposit had dried in a pattern that looked almost deliberate, like someone had pressed their fingers into the porcelain and left marks behind. 4 finger marks. I stared at them for longer than I should have. "You gonna clean that or just look at it?" Jeff asked. I grabbed the towel hanging on the edge of the sink, wiped the basin down, and threw the towel under Jeff's bed. "Hey, I'll get it later." "You won't." I didn't argue. He was right. My phone buzzed on the desk. I picked it up and saw a text from Emily. "Why is Deborah yelling your name in the kitchen?" I stared at the screen. Typed I overslept, deleted it. Typed I'll be there in 5, deleted that too. Typed sorry. Stared at it for 10 seconds, then deleted it and put the phone down. Emily worked the front desk at Old Faithful Inn. She was 23, maybe 24. and she'd been kind to me all summer, even though I'd given her no reason to be. She smiled when I walked past the lobby. She asked how my day was going. She texted me when Deborah was looking for me, which happened more often than it should have. I didn't answer her text because I didn't have a good excuse, and I was tired of hearing myself lie. A few minutes later, someone walked past the window. I looked up and saw Shane Santiago, the maintenance lead, carrying a pipe wrench and a toolbox. He was 50, maybe older, with the kind of face that came from 30 years of fixing things people broke. He stopped outside the screen and looked at Jeff. "Biscuit basin's closed," Shane said. "Small hydrothermal explosion. And tell everybody to stop flushing paper towels, because the drains are backing up all over Old Faithful." Jeff nodded. "Got it." Shane shifted the wrench to his other hand. "I found a child's melted sandal in a service drain behind Hamilton's store. Nearest reported lost sandal was at Grand Prismatic yesterday." I looked up from the sink. "How does a sandal get from Grand Prismatic to Hamilton's store?" "It doesn't," Shane said. "That's the problem." He kept walking. Jeff sat back down on his bed and opened his laptop again. "This place is so weird." I went back to looking for a clean shirt. By 10:30, Deborah had started calling me. I let the first call go to voicemail, the second one too. The third time, I turned my phone off and left the dorm. I cut around the back of Old Faithful Inn, hoping to avoid the kitchen entrance. The employee path was empty except for a couple of housekeepers walking toward the laundry building. The air smelled like pine and sulfur. It always smelled like sulfur. You got used to it after a week. The path curved past the inn and came out near the boardwalk. I stopped when I saw the crowd. Tourists were gathering in a loose semicircle around Old Faithful, cameras ready, kids bouncing on their toes. A few people sat on the benches near the viewing area. Most stood at the rail, waiting. Ranger Beverly Robinson was standing near the front of the crowd, hands on her duty belt, giving the standard warning in a voice that carried across the boardwalk. "Stay on the boardwalk. Keep children close. Treat every thermal feature as lethal. If a hat, phone, sunglasses, anything falls into a geyser, we do not retrieve it. The park does not risk lives for objects." A kid in a blue Yellowstone hoodie raised his hand. "Do the geysers ever give anything back?" His mother grabbed his shoulder. "Caleb, stop." Beverly looked at the kid for a second longer than she should have. Then she said, "No." I leaned against the rail and watched the geysers cone. Old Faithful was predictable. It erupted every 90 minutes, give or take 10. The park posted the schedule at the visitor center. Tourists planned their whole day around it. I'd watched it erupt a dozen times from the employee path. It was always the same. A few spurts of water, a pause, then a clean white plume that shot up 100 feet and lasted for 2 or 3 minutes. People cheered. Kids pointed. Cameras clicked. The cone coughed once. The crowd leaned forward. Old Faithful erupted 8 minutes early. The first burst came out gray and heavy, like dirty bathwater under pressure. It didn't shoot up clean. It boiled out of the cone in a thick, uneven column that smelled like the water from my dorm sink. The crowd cheered for half a second. Then a human body shot out of the column and hit the runoff slope with a wet crack. The crowd cheered for half a second. Then the sound died in pieces, starting from the front row and peeling backward like someone had hit mute on the world. The body should have been dead when it landed. It hit the runoff slope hard enough that I heard bone crack from 50 feet away. The man wore rotted hiking clothes, the kind that looked like they had been buried and dug up wrong. An orange external frame backpack, the tall kind nobody used anymore, was still strapped to his shoulders. His skin was waxy and red, like something boiled too long. His eyelids had sealed shut under a pale crust of mineral deposit. Steam poured from his open mouth in a steady ribbon. He rolled onto his stomach. I watched him press both cooked hands into the white center and start crawling toward the boardwalk. His fingers left wet prints. His knees scraped forward. He moved like someone who had forgotten how joints worked, but still remembered the idea of walking. A man in a blue windbreaker jumped the railing before anyone could stop him. Beverly screamed, "Get back! Get back now!" The man in the windbreaker did not listen. He grabbed the crawling man under the arms, trying to lift him like you would lift someone who had fallen. The crawling man's skin sloughed against his forearms. It peeled away in long strips, the way boiled chicken comes off the bone if you pull too hard. The man in the windbreaker screamed. Both of his arms blistered instantly, the skin going red and shiny and wrong. The crawling man lifted his crusted face. His sealed eyelids did not open, but his mouth did. He whispered one word, "Marjorie." It sounded like his throat was full of water, like he was speaking from the bottom of a bathtub. Then he clamped both hands around the other man's wrists and started dragging him backward toward the steaming runoff channel. Beverly hit him with her baton. The baton sank into softened bone. It did not stop him. I stood there. I watched it happen. I did not move. Then someone yelled my name. "Mark!" Emily was running toward the boardwalk from the direction of the inn. She had a first aid kit in both hands. Her hair had come loose from its tie. She yelled my name again, and the sound of it snapped something inside my chest. I climbed the railing. The crawling man was still pulling. The man in the windbreaker was screaming and digging his heels into the center, but his shoes could not find traction. Beverly hit the crawling man again. This time, the baton cracked through his shoulder, and steam hissed out of the wound instead of blood. I grabbed the man in the windbreaker by the belt and pulled. Beverly hit the crawling man a third time. A woman dragged a boy in a blue hoodie away from the boardwalk. The boy was crying. The woman was saying his name over and over. The crawling man's hands tore loose. They came off the other man's skin with a sound like tape peeling off meat. Wet and sticky and wrong. Emily reached the railing. Beverly dropped the baton and grabbed the man in the windbreaker under one arm. I grabbed the other. We hauled him over the rail and onto the boardwalk, while Old Faithful's eruption died behind us into a low coughing spray. The smell hit me then. Pennies and sulfur and whetstone. The same smell that had come out of my dorm sink that morning. The man in the windbreaker was shaking. His forearms were blistered from wrist to elbow, the skin red and slick and already starting to weep clear fluid. Emily opened the first aid kit. Her hands were steady. Mine were not. Beverly turned back toward the runoff slope. The crawling man had stopped moving. He lay face down in the center, with steam still pouring from his mouth. His orange backpack looked older than I was. Park staff started clearing the boardwalk. They used calm voices and spread hands, herding tourists toward the visitor center like nothing had happened except a normal accident. A ranger I did not know kept saying, "Please move toward the education center. Stay together. Keep your children close." I helped Emily wrap the man's arms in gauze. He did not say anything. He just stared at his hands like he was waiting for them to explain themselves. The woman who had dragged the boy away came back. She knelt next to the man in the windbreaker and said, "Andrew, can you hear me?" He nodded. She looked at me. "Thank you." I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. Emily finished with the gauze and closed the kit. She stood up, brushed her hands on her slacks, and looked at me like she was deciding whether to yell or cry or just walk away. Before she could pick one, Deborah found me. She came around the side of the inn fast enough that I knew she had been looking. When she reached me, she slapped my shoulder hard enough that it stung through my shirt. "If you had been in the dish room where you belonged," she said, "Emily would not have been the one running first aid into a geyser basin." I opened my mouth. I did not have an answer, but I opened my mouth anyway because that was what I always did when Deborah yelled at me. Then every toilet in the ground floor public restrooms flushed at once. The sound was loud enough to hear from outside. A mechanical roar, all of them going at the same time, and then a woman screamed. Deborah turned toward the restroom doors. Emily took a step back. I looked at the entrance and saw steam rolling out under the gap at the bottom. Samuel Ortiz opened the door. He backed out slowly, one step at a time, like he was trying not to spook something. Steam poured around his ankles. It rose in thick curls, the kind that comes off a pot when you lift the lid too fast. A hand reached over the threshold from inside a stall. It had no fingernails. The skin was pale and soft, like something that had been underwater too long. It flattened itself against the tile and stayed there, fingers spread, while steam poured around Samuel's shoes. Deborah grabbed my shoulder and shoved me toward the main lobby before I could say anything about Samuel's scream. She was already barking orders at Emily, at Shane, at two bellhops whose names I didn't know. Get everyone inside. Lock the front doors. Keep people away from the restrooms. The crowd moved like cattle, slow and stubborn until someone pushed, then too fast in the wrong direction. A woman in a sun visor asked if the geysers always did this. A man with a tripod wanted to know when the next eruption would happen. I wanted to tell him that Old Faithful had already given something back, but my mouth wasn't working right. The lobby swallowed us. Huge log beams rose overhead, like the ribs of something dead and sacred. Balconies stacked toward the ceiling in zigzag layers. The stone fireplace squatted cold and black in the center of the room. For almost 3 minutes, people treated the space like it could protect them. Maybe it was the size. Maybe it was the age. Maybe it was just easier to believe that a building this solid couldn't let the outside in. Guests pressed against the windows. Outside, rangers were stretching yellow tape across the boardwalk. One of them hammered a sign into the ground near the Old Faithful cone. I couldn't read it from here, but I knew what it said. Closed. Dangerous. Stay back. The doors at the far end of the lobby opened. Beverly came through with Andrew between her and another ranger I didn't recognize. Andrew's arms were wrapped in wet towels that were already turning pink. His face was the color of old newspaper. Caleb and Linda followed a few steps behind, Caleb clutching his mother's hand hard enough to wrinkle her knuckles. Beverly walked straight to Deborah. She didn't waste time on comfort. "Emergency services are staging at Madison Junction," she said. "Grand Loop Road is being checked for damage. Nobody uses sinks, toilets, showers, or floor drains until maintenance tells us why scalding water is backing through the lines." Deborah's jaw tightened. "How long until we can move people?" "I don't know yet." "Then we seal the restrooms now." Beverly nodded and turned toward the hallway that led to the public bathrooms. Shane was already moving that direction with a ring of caution tape. I stood there like an idiot, trying to figure out what I was supposed to do, when the kitchen door banged open and pots crashed. Samuel shouted once. Just once. Then metal hit tile, and something heavy dragged. I ran before I decided to. Jeff was right behind me. Shane dropped the caution tape and pulled ahead of both of us, his boots hammering the floor. We hit the kitchen door together. Samuel was in the dish room, halfway inside the 3-compartment sink, not leaning over it, not reaching into it. Inside it, his body was folded backward at the waist, like something below the drain had hooked him by the spine and pulled. Boiling gray water frothed around his chest. His hand slapped the stainless steel. His mouth was open. He wasn't screaming anymore. Shane grabbed him by the wrists and pulled. Samuel didn't move. "Help me!" Shane yelled. I lunged forward and got my hands under Samuel's shoulders. His shirt was already too hot to hold. The water around him wasn't draining. It was rising. Jeff grabbed Samuel's belt and pulled so hard the leather creaked. The drain made a sound like stone grinding against metal. It widened, not cracked, not broken. It just opened, stretching wider than the pipe, wider than the basin, wider than anything that should fit inside a sink. The steel around it didn't tear. It just bent, like the rules had stopped applying. Samuel slid down. Shane's grip broke. Samuel's hands disappeared under the gray water. His head went next, tilting back as if he were being swallowed whole. I saw his eyes. I saw his mouth open one more time. Then he was gone. The drain snapped shut. The water drained in one clean gulp, polite and ordinary, like nothing had happened. The sink was empty except for a thin ring of white crust along the basin edge. Shane dropped his wrench. It hit the floor with a clang that sounded too loud in the sudden quiet. "The pipes don't go anywhere large enough for that to happen," he said. His voice was flat. He was staring at the sink like it owed him an answer. Jeff turned away and vomited into a trash can near the walk-in cooler. I heard him gag twice, then spit. I looked into the sink. Samuel's name badge floated in the center of the basin. The plastic was already warped, the edges curled from heat. His name was still readable. Samuel Ortiz. Zontera. Kitchen staff. I reached for it. Shane caught my wrist. "Don't." I pulled back. My hands were shaking. Beverly's voice came from the doorway. "What happened?" Shane turned. His face was gray. "Samuel went into the sink. The drain opened. He's gone." "Gone where?" "I don't know." Beverly's radio crackled. A man's voice came through, calm and official. "Madison Junction to all stations. Basin-wide hydrothermal disturbance. Multiple injuries. Possible gas exposure. Prepare guests for evacuation by bus toward West Yellowstone, as soon as the road is confirmed safe." Beverly lifted the radio. "Old Faithful Inn, copy. What's the ETA on buses?" The radio hissed. Another voice cut in, higher, frantic, coming from a different station. Midway. People are walking out of Excelsior Geyser Crater. They're not." Static swallowed the rest. A third voice from somewhere else. "West Thumb to any station. The lakeshore is boiling. There are figures surfacing under the dock." The first voice came back. "Keep the channel clear." Then the transmission cut off. What replaced it wasn't static. It was breathing. Wet, slow, rhythmic, like someone drowning in reverse. Beverly lowered the radio. The sound kept going. Linda Park recognized him first. She had taken Caleb into Old Faithful Visitor Education Center to use the restroom while Andrew waited on a bench outside with his bandaged arms. When she came back, she was holding Caleb's hand too tightly, and her face had gone pale in a way that made me think she was about to faint. She walked straight to Beverly and said, "The man from the geyser. I know who he is." Beverly stopped talking into her radio. "What?" "There's a display inside. Missing persons. Safety exhibit about thermal burns." Linda's voice was shaking. "Orange backpack. Beard. Torn left sleeve. It's him. Beverly stared at her for 3 seconds, then handed the radio to Emily and walked into the visitor center. I followed because I needed to see it myself, even though part of me already knew Linda was right. The display was near the back wall, past the geology models and the stuffed bison. A row of faded photographs under a sign that read, "Protect yourself and others." Most of the pictures showed people standing too close to hot springs or climbing over guardrails. One photograph showed a young man in hiking clothes with an orange external frame backpack. The caption underneath said Howard Voss, 26, missing since August 1981, last seen near Morning Glory Pool. The man in the photo had a beard. His left sleeve was torn at the shoulder. Beverly stood in front of the display with her hands on her belt. She did not say anything for a long time. I looked at the photograph again. The colors had faded to yellow and blue, but the backpack was unmistakable. So was the sleeve. "He hasn't aged," Beverly said quietly. Linda nodded. Caleb pressed against her side and did not ask questions. Beverly pulled her radio back up and keyed the mic.
Madison, this is Robinson at Old Faithful Visitor Center. Confirm identity on thermal victim from earlier eruption. Name is Howard Voss. Missing person from 1981.
Static answered her. Then Michael Denham's voice came through, flat and careful.
Copy that, Robinson. We have similar reports from Midway Geyser Basin. Witnesses say figures are walking out of Excelsior Crater. Descriptions match missing persons from the 70s and 80s.
Another voice broke in, higher and panicked.
West Thumb, the lakeshore is boiling. People are surfacing under the dock. They're not swimming. They're just standing up out of the water.
A third ranger from Norris cut across the channel.
We have movement at Porcelain Basin. Repeat, multiple figures emerging from runoff channels.
Michael's voice came back, steady but strained.
All stations, keep the channel clear. Evacuations are priority. Do not engage.
Beverly lowered the radio. She looked at me, then at Linda, then back at the photograph of Howard Voss. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "His name is Howard Voss. He disappeared in 1981. He has not aged." She paused. If people who died in thermal features are coming back, every hot spring in Yellowstone might be an exit. Nobody answered her. There was nothing to say. We walked back to the inn. Andrew was still sitting on the bench outside the visitor center, with his arms wrapped in towels. Emily helped him stand. Deborah met us at the lobby doors and told us the evacuation bus was on its way. She said it like a promise, but her hands were shaking when she checked her watch. The bus arrived just after noon. Thomas Greer pulled into the Old Faithful Inn parking lot with the windshield fogged white from the inside. He opened the door and climbed down slowly, like his legs were not working right. When Deborah walked over to him, he wiped his face with one sleeve and said, "I passed 3 empty cars near Firehole Lake Drive. Doors open. Tires melted into the asphalt." Deborah nodded once. "Get everyone loaded. Guests first." Thomas nodded and opened the luggage compartments. Deborah started calling names from a list she had written on the back of a guest receipt. Families with children. Injured guests. Staff last. She moved through the crowd like she was counting inventory, calm and fast, pointing people toward the bus steps. I stayed near Emily because her hands were still shaking. She had not said anything since we left the visitor center. I knew she had only been out by Old Faithful with the first aid kit because I had skipped work. And I knew she knew I knew, and neither of us was saying it out loud. Jeff sat down in the seat behind us and leaned forward between the headrests. "The park sits on a volcano," he whispered. I turned around. "What?" The park. It's a super volcano, caldera, 600,000 years old. The whole thing is just a thin crust over magma. He was talking fast, the way he always did when he was scared. The geysers, the hot springs, all of it. It's just cracks in the lid. Jeff, I'm saying it's a volcano, he said again, louder this time. That's what this is. It has to be. Emily turned in her seat and looked at him. Her voice was very quiet. Then what crawled out of Old Faithful? Jeff opened his mouth. Then he closed it and sat back. The bus was almost full when Thomas closed the door. Deborah stood near the front, counting heads one more time. Beverly was outside with Shane, guiding the last few stragglers away from the building. Andrew sat near the back with Linda and Caleb. His bandaged arms were leaking clear fluid through the towels. The pavement under the rear wheels turned white. At first, I thought it was paint. Then I realized the asphalt was lightening from below, bleaching outward in a perfect circle. The white turned blue. Then it turned clear, like shallow tropical water lit from underneath. The bus tilted. Steam hissed up through the wheel wells. People in the back seat started screaming. Thomas grabbed the steering wheel and tried to straighten the bus, but the rear axle was already sinking. The pavement had not cracked. It had just opened, smooth and silent, into a pool that had not existed 10 seconds earlier. A woman rose out of the water. She was wearing an old National Park Service uniform, the kind with the flat-brimmed hat and the long skirt. Her face was peeled clean in places, red and white like a diagram in a medical textbook. Her hair floated around her head as if she were still underwater. She stood in the middle of the new pool with her shoulders just above the surface and looked directly at Shane Santiago, who was standing beside the sinking rear tire. Shane backed up. No. The woman stepped forward. Her hands came out of the water, gray and soft, fingers spread. Beverly pulled the canister of bear spray from her belt and fired. The orange cloud hit the woman's face and boiled. The spray evaporated before it touched her skin. Beverly fired again. The second burst did nothing. The woman put both hands on Shane's chest. Shane screamed. His boots punched through the crust, then his ankles, then his shins. He grabbed the woman's wrists and tried to pull her hands away, but his palms blistered where he touched her. The skin on his forearms turned red, then white, then started to split. "Get off!" Shane shouted. "Get off! Get off!" The woman did not let go. She pulled him down, slow and steady, like she was reeling in a rope. Shane went under the pool up to his chest, then his shoulders, then his chin. He sucked in one last breath before his mouth went under, and I saw his eyes go wide and white. The woman straightened. Her burned skin tightened. The peeled places on her face filled in, smooth and pink. Her cloudy eyes cleared. For one horrible second, she looked less dead. She looked almost human. From inside the pool, Shane's voice started calling. "Deborah." It was his voice. Not copied. Not close. Exactly his voice. Coming up through the boiling water like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. "Deborah. Deborah."
Help.
Deborah was standing beside the bus with one hand on the open luggage compartment. She froze. Her face went slack. She looked at the pool, then at Beverly, then back at the pool.
Deborah, please. Deborah.
Took one step forward. Beverly grabbed her arm and pulled her back. "Everybody off the bus," Deborah said. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat and said it again, louder. "Everybody off the bus. Now." Thomas opened the door. People poured out, stumbling over each other, dragging children and bags. Emily grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the front. Jeff was right behind us. Andrew tried to stand and fell back into his seat. Linda lifted Caleb over the headrest and carried him down the aisle. The bus was still tilting. The rear axle groaned. Steam poured through the floor vents. Deborah stood beside the tilting bus and pointed everyone back toward Old Faithful Inn, while Shane Santiago's voice called her name from the blue pool. The parking lot was dying in pieces. I ran after Deborah as the blacktop cracked under me and white mineral crust spread in branching lines that hissed when my sneakers crossed them. Steam rose from drainage grates in slow, twisting columns. The bus tilted farther into the blue pool, its rear axle groaning as the asphalt underneath turned to soup. Shane's voice kept calling from somewhere under the surface, saying Deborah's name over and over like he was stuck on a loop. Behind us, something moved beneath the luggage compartment. Howard Voss crawled out from under the bus chassis, his orange pack dragging behind him. He moved faster now, his joints loose and fluid, his waxy hands slapping the pavement with a wet rhythm that made my stomach turn. Thomas Greer was still on the ground near the rear tire, clutching his bare foot and trying to push himself backward with his elbows. Howard grabbed Thomas by the ankle. Thomas kicked. His other shoe flew off and skidded across the blacktop. Howard's grip tightened, and I heard the skin split before I saw it. The sound was like tearing wet fabric. Thomas screamed as the flesh above his heel peeled away in a long strip, exposing muscle that steamed in the open air. "Move!" Beverly shouted. She had Emily by the arm and was pulling her toward the inn. "Move now!" I ran. Jeff was ahead of me, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Deborah limped on her left leg but kept pace. Linda dragged Caleb away from the windows while Andrew stumbled beside her, his bandaged arms held stiff in front of him like he was afraid to let them touch anything. Behind us, the bus sank another foot into the pool that had opened without warning, and Thomas's screaming cut off into a wet gurgle. We hit the side entrance to Old Faithful Inn at full speed. Beverly shoved the door open, and we fell into the hallway in a tangle of elbows and gasping breath. The air inside was cooler, but wrong, damp and heavy, like standing too close to a boiling pot. "Bar the doors," Deborah said. She was bent over with her hands on her knees, but her voice was steady. "Luggage carts, benches, anything heavy." We dragged furniture from the lobby. Jeff and I flipped a wooden bench on its side and wedged it under the front door handles. Emily and Beverly pushed 2 luggage carts against the side entrance and piled chairs on top. Andrew sat on the floor near the stone fireplace, shaking, while Linda pressed Caleb's face against her shoulder so he would not look out the windows. The returned did not beat on the doors. I kept waiting for fists, for shoulders slamming into wood, for the kind of siege you see in movies. Nothing came. The doors stayed quiet. Outside, figures moved across the parking lot in slow, deliberate lines, but they were not coming for the inn. They were just walking, like they had all the time in the world. "They don't need to break in," Beverly said. She was standing near the public restrooms with the fire axe resting against her shoulder. "They're already inside." A wet scraping sound came from the floor near the phones. I turned and saw a hand push through the decorative brass drain cover, fingers first, then knuckles, then a wrist. The hand was small, child-sized, with pale skin and nails caked in white mineral crust. It flattened itself against the tile and began pulling the rest of the arm through an opening that should not have fit a pencil. "Back up," Beverly said. She crossed the lobby in 3 steps and brought the axe down on the wrist. The blade bit into bone with a crack, and steam hissed from the wound. The hand jerked once, then slid back through the drain and disappeared. The cover snapped into place like nothing had happened. Emily made a sound I had never heard from her before, high and thin. From the laundry room, someone coughed. We all turned. The laundry room door was half open, and steam poured through the gap in a thick, rolling cloud that smelled like sulfur and wet stone. A shape moved inside the steam, tall and narrow, unfolding like a piece of furniture being assembled in reverse. A man stepped into the hallway. He wore a gray suit with narrow lapels, the kind you see in old photographs from the 60s. His hair was slicked back with something that was not hair gel. His face was red and tight, the skin stretched smooth over his skull, and his eyes were open but cloudy, like milk poured into dirty water. He looked at us. He smiled. Then he took a step forward, and his shoe left a wet print on the carpet. "Kitchen," Deborah said. Her voice cracked on the second syllable. "We need to shut the water off in the kitchen." "Deborah," Jeff said. He was staring at the industrial swinging doors that led to the prep area. "Deborah, listen." I heard it then. A voice coming from the other side of the doors, muffled but clear. "Mark," the voice said. "Mark, help me climb out." It was Samuel. I knew it was not Samuel. I knew Samuel was gone, folded backward through a drain that should not have opened. But the voice was his, patient and a little embarrassed, like he was asking me to spot him on a ladder. "Mark, I can't get my shoulders through. Just pull on my arms." Jeff grabbed my elbow. "Do not go in there." "I'm not going in there." Good. Because you look like you're thinking about it." I was not thinking about it. I was thinking about the name badge I had seen floating in the sink, warped and melting. I was thinking about how Samuel had called my name once before the pots crashed. Jeff let go of my arm and crossed to the kitchen window, the small square of reinforced glass set into the left door. He looked through it for 2 seconds, then stepped back fast and pressed his hand over his mouth. "What?" I said. He shook his head. "Jeff." "What?" He pointed at the window without looking at it again. I looked. Samuel's face was pressed against the inside of the dish machine's glass door, flattened like a handprint on a steamed-up windshield. His eyes were open. His mouth was open. Boiling water sprayed over him in rhythmic bursts from the machine's upper wash arm, and every time the spray hit, his smile widened a little more. I stepped back from the window. "They're trading places," Beverly said. She was still holding the axe, but her knuckles were white around the handle. Howard grabbed Andrew and got stronger. The woman took Shane and looked almost human for a second. "This isn't mercy. Yellowstone is returning what it kept and taking fresh bodies to replace them." "What does that mean?" Linda asked. She was still holding Caleb, but she was looking at Beverly now, her face pale and tight. "It means the thermal system isn't just erupting," Beverly said. "It's returning its dead, and it's taking living people to fill the spaces they leave behind." "How?" Andrew said. His voice was hoarse and thin. "How is it doing that?" "I don't know, but they need contact, long enough to drag you into heat, water, steam, anything connected to the basin. If they touch you, they pull you under, and you trade places." Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket. We all stared at her. She pulled the phone out slowly, like it might burn her hand, and looked at the screen. "It's Leah," she said. "The phones are dead," Deborah said. "It's a text, from before they cut out." Emily's thumb moved across the screen. "She says she's trapped at the lodge cabins, cabin 28. She's got 2 guests with her, and something's in the bathroom." "We're not going out there again," Deborah said. "She's my friend. She's dead, or she's about to be. We all are if we keep moving. Emily looked at me. I saw the question in her face before she said anything. You crossed open ground for me, I said. When Old Faithful erupted, you ran out there with a first aid kit because I wasn't where I was supposed to be. Wade! I'm going whether you approve or not. Deborah closed her eyes. You are the dumbest, most useless employee I've ever written up. I know. If you die out there, I'm putting it in your file. I almost laughed. It came out as a cough. Jeff stepped away from the kitchen door. I'm coming too. Jeff, you don't... I'm not staying here with whatever's in that dish machine. I'm coming. Beverly lifted the axe. I know the service paths. We go through Hamilton's, cut behind the store, and come up on the cabins from the employee side. Stay off the boardwalks. The returned are using them. Deborah looked at the doors, then at Linda and Andrew and Caleb, then at the steam still pouring from the laundry room. She rubbed her face with both hands. I know the paths better than any of you, she said. If we're doing this, we're doing it fast, and we're doing it my way. We left Linda, Andrew, and Caleb in the lobby with the furniture piled against the doors. Linda did not argue. She just held Caleb tighter and nodded once. Caleb looked at me over her shoulder as we crossed to the side exit, his face small and pale above his blue Yellowstone hoodie. Are the geysers giving people back now? He asked. His voice was quiet, like he was asking about the weather. I did not answer. Beverly pushed the side door open, and we stepped into the heat. The employee path was narrow, bordered by pine trees on one side, and the low wooden fence that separated staff areas from guest areas on the other. The ground was dirt and gravel, and it crunched under our feet as we moved. Castle Geyser was erupting in the distance, but not the way it was supposed to. The column convulsed, throwing up dark shapes that arced through the air and splashed into the runoff channels. I saw a shoe, a camera, something white and curved that might have been bone. Don't look at it, Deborah said. She was in front, moving fast despite her limp. Eyes on the path. We passed the back of Old Faithful Inn, then the loading dock, then the dumpster enclosure. The air smelled like sulfur and hot metal. My shirt stuck to my back. Jeff was breathing hard beside me, his hands clenched into fists. Ahead, the path curved toward Hamilton's store. The boardwalks around Upper Geyser Basin were visible through the trees, and I could see figures standing on them. They were not moving. They were just standing, evenly spaced like fence posts. Waiting. They're on the boardwalks, Beverly said. She slowed, then stopped. All of them. Are they blocking the path? Emily asked. No, they're just standing there. Then we keep moving, Deborah said. We kept moving. Hamilton's store came into view, its windows fogged white. The front door was propped open, and steam rolled out in slow, lazy curls. I could hear water dripping inside, a steady rhythm like a leaking faucet. Service entrance, Deborah said. She pointed to a narrow door on the side of the building. Through there, out the back, then straight to the cabins. We crossed the 20 feet of open ground between the path and the store at a run. My sneakers hit gravel, then dirt, then the wooden step outside the service door. Deborah grabbed the handle and pulled. The door opened into darkness and steam. Somewhere behind us, a child's voice called my name. I stopped. Turned. Wade, the voice said. It was high and clear, and it sounded exactly like Caleb. Wade, are you still there? I looked back toward the inn. The side door was closed. The windows were dark. Wade, I can't see you, the voice said. It was coming from the steam near the boardwalk, where the figures stood still and silent. Wade, where did you go? I stared at the steam. There was no child there. The windows of Hamilton's store were fogged white from the inside. I could see shapes through the glass, but no movement. Emily reached the door first. Beverly motioned her back and pushed it open with the axe handle. Hot air rolled out, thick enough to taste. The smell was sulfur, wet paper, and something sweet that made my stomach turn. Inside, every surface dripped. Postcards curled off the wire racks in strips. The candy bars had floated out of their boxes and drifted in an inch of water that covered the floor. The tiles near the soda fountain had lifted like scales, white crust spreading from underneath in branching lines. I stepped in, and the water soaked through my shoes instantly. It was hot enough to sting. "Stay close to the shelves," Beverly said. "Don't touch anything that looks wet." Jeff moved behind me, breathing hard. Emily kept her hand on my shoulder. Deborah was already halfway across the store, her shoes splashing through the water as she headed for the back exit that led to the employee path. She moved fast, like she thought speed would keep her safe. She slipped. 1 second, she was upright. The next, her feet went out from under her and she hit the water palms first. The sound she made was sharp and immediate. She jerked her hands up and I saw her right palm already blistering, the skin turning white at the edges. "Deborah!" Beverly started forward. The man came up behind the counter like he had been lying flat. He wore a Yellowstone sweatshirt that clung to him, soaked through, steam rising from his shoulders. His face was red and waxy, his eyes clouded, and when he opened his mouth, water ran out over his chin. He reached over the counter and grabbed Deborah's burned hand. Deborah screamed once, then she stopped wasting air. She drove her free thumb into his eye. The eye collapsed under the pressure, soft as a boiled grape, and gray fluid ran down his cheek. He did not let go. His fingers tightened on her wrist, pulling her toward the counter, toward the water pooling around his feet. "Get Emily out if you find her," Deborah said. She looked at me when she said it. Not at Beverly, at me. Beverly crossed the store in 3 steps. She swung the axe overhand and buried it in the man's neck. The blade sank deep, cutting through softened muscle and bone that gave like wet wood. Steam burst from the wound, hot enough to make me turn my face away. The man collapsed backward. Deborah fell with him, still holding his face, her hand locked in his grip. The floor under them turned white, then blue, then opened into a hole that had not been there a second before. They went through together. The hole sealed. White mineral crust spread across the tiles in a perfect circle, smooth and hard as porcelain. I ran forward and dropped to my knees, pressing my hands against the crust. It was already cool, solid. There was no crack, no seam, no way to pry it open. "Deborah," I said. Nothing answered. Emily pulled me back. Jeff stood near the counter, staring at the place where the man had been. Beverly wiped the axe blade on her pants and turned toward the back door. "We keep moving," Beverly said. Jeff started. "I know," Beverly said. "We keep moving." Emily's hand was shaking when she took mine. I stood up. My knees were wet. The water on the floor was already cooling, the white crust spreading in thin lines between the tiles. I looked back once at the sealed circle where Deborah had gone through. Then I followed Beverly out the back exit onto the service path. The air outside felt cold by comparison. The path was gravel and packed dirt, lined with lodge pole pines that blocked the view of the geyser basin. I could hear Castle Geyser still erupting in the distance, a continuous roar that rose and fell like breathing. Closer, something metal clanged against wood, over and over. Stay off the grass, Beverly said. If the ground looks wet, go around it. We walked single file. Beverly led with the axe. I came next, then Emily, then Jeff. The path curved past the maintenance shed with its door hanging open. Inside, tools floated in a foot of steaming water. A pair of boots stood upright near the threshold, still laced, as if someone had stepped out of them mid-stride. Jeff made a sound behind me. I did not turn around. The path opened onto the clearing where the Old Faithful Lodge cabins sat in a loose horseshoe around a gravel lot. The cabins were small, single-story with green roofs and white trim. Most of them looked empty, their curtains drawn, their doors closed. Cabin 28 was near the far end, its door cracked open, steam leaking out around the frame. "Leah," Emily called. The door opened wider. Leah Kim stood in the doorway, her right arm wrapped in towels that had soaked through with blood, and something clear that looked like cooking oil. Her face was pale, her eyes too wide, and she swayed when she stepped onto the threshold. "Emily," she said. Her voice cracked. "Emily, don't come in. The bathroom." Emily was already moving. I followed her across the gravel. Beverly stayed on the path, watching the tree line. Jeff stopped halfway, his hands opening and closing at his sides. Inside, the cabin smelled like wet stone and rust. The furniture had been pushed against the walls. The bathroom door was open, the light on, and I could see the sink hanging crooked from the wall. The faucet snapped off at the base. Water still dripped from the broken pipe, pooling on the tile floor. Leah sat down hard on the bed. Emily knelt beside her and carefully unwrapped the towels. The skin on Leah's forearm had peeled away in sheets, leaving raw pink flesh underneath. Clear fluid wept from the edges of the wound. I had to look away. "What happened?" Emily asked. "The faucet turned on by itself," Leah said. She spoke slowly, like she was reading from a script. My mother's voice came from the drain. My mother is alive in Sacramento. When I reached to shut it off, fingers came through the stream. They peeled the skin from my forearm. Emily looked at the bathroom. "I broke the faucet with a lamp," she said. "I shoved towels into the sink until the basin cracked." The sink was cracked. A long split ran down the porcelain from the faucet mount to the drain. White crust had formed along the crack, sealing it shut. Beverly's radio crackled. She stepped into the cabin doorway and lifted it to her ear. Static hissed through the speaker, then cleared.
"Madison Junction, this is Denham. Copy?"
Beverly pressed the talk button.
"Michael, this is Robinson. We're at Old Faithful Lodge cabins with civilians. What's your status?"
Silence. Then Michael's voice came back, calm and even, like he was reading a checklist.
"Ranger Emily Valdez disappeared near Norris Geyser Basin, August 1994. Ranger Christopher Lane disappeared near Norris Geyser Basin, June 2002. Ranger Allison Frost disappeared near Norris Geyser Basin, September
2007. Beverly's hand tightened on the radio.
"Michael, report your status. Ranger David Nguyen disappeared near Norris Geyser Basin, July 2012. Ranger Beverly Ann Robinson, badge number 4732. Date of birth, March 14th, 1986. Social security number."
Beverly shut the radio off. Her hand was shaking. She clipped the radio back onto her belt and looked at me. "The road to Madison is gone," she said. I walked to the cabin window and looked out. Grand Loop Road ran past the lodge cabins in a wide curve, heading north toward Madison Junction and the park's west exit. Steam rose from the asphalt in 3 places, thin white columns that twisted in the wind. Between the steam, figures walked. They moved slowly, their arms hanging loose, their feet dragging. Some wore hiking clothes, some wore ranger uniforms. One wore a dress that might have been yellow once, before the heat turned it gray. They walked between the abandoned cars, stopping at each one to press their hands against the windows. They did not break the glass. They just touched it, like they were checking to see if anyone was still inside. I counted 6 figures, then 7. Then I stopped counting. Behind me, Emily was wrapping Leah's arm with a clean towel from the cabin's linen shelf. Jeff stood in the doorway next to Beverly, staring at the radio on her belt like it might start talking again. Beverly watched the road through the window over my shoulder. "We can't drive out," she said. I nodded. I kept watching the figures on the road. One of them stopped in the middle of the asphalt and turned its head toward the cabins. Its face was too far away to see clearly, but I knew it was looking at us. Beverly said the only place she could think of was Old Faithful Snow Lodge. The commercial kitchen had a walk-in freezer with a heavy insulated door and no floor drains inside the box. "Cold doesn't kill them," she said, checking the window again. "But every time they leave steam or hot water, their joints stiffen and their skin crusts." Emily asked how long we could last in a freezer. Beverly said longer than we would last out here. We left through the back door of cabin 28. The ground clicked under my boots, like someone snapping wooden rulers in half. I could see the snow lodge from where we stood, maybe 200 yards across open pavement and grass. The distance looked impossible. Beverly went first with the axe. Emily stayed close to me. Jeff kept one hand on my shoulder. Leah limped between us, her wrapped arm held against her chest. We made it halfway before Jeff tripped. I thought he had caught his foot on a crack in the pavement. Then I looked down and saw the hand. It had come out of a puddle no bigger than a dinner plate, and it had Jeff's shoelace wrapped around 2 fingers. Jeff screamed and tried to pull free. The hand tightened. Steam rose from the puddle. Beverly spun back, and I already had her knife out. I cut the lace just above Jeff's shoe, and he stumbled forward. His sock was soaked through. I could see the skin underneath turning red. "Move," Beverly said. Jeff made it 10 more steps. Then his legs folded, and he went down on both knees. Leah let go of Emily and ran back to him. I shouted her name, but she was already kneeling beside Jeff, trying to get her good arm under his shoulder. The puddle behind them bulged upward. It rose like a sheet of boiling water standing on edge, and it folded over both of them before either one could scream a second time. The sound stopped at the same moment. The sheet collapsed back into the pavement and left nothing but steam. Emily grabbed my wrist and pulled me forward. I could not look away from where Jeff had been. Beverly shoved me hard enough to break whatever was holding me in place. We reached the Snow Lodge kitchen through a side door that Beverly kicked open. The floor inside was dry. The lights were still on. It looked so normal that for half a second I thought we had made it. Beverly crossed the kitchen in 4 strides and threw open the walk-in freezer door. Cold air rolled out. "Inside," she said. Emily went first. I followed her and turned back to hold the door for Beverly. She was not moving. Her head was tilted, like she was listening to something. I heard it too. A voice calling from the hallway beyond the kitchen. It was saying Beverly's name. Then it said Deborah's name. Then it said both names together in Deborah's voice. "Deborah is dead," I said. Beverly looked at me. Her face was calm. "I know," she said. She lifted the axe, stepped back, and pulled the freezer door shut from the outside. I hit the door with both palms and shouted her name. Through the small safety window, I saw her shape turn toward the hallway. Steam poured through the kitchen doorway and swallowed her in 3 seconds. The axe hit something once. The sound was wet and hard at the same time. Then the window went white. Inside the walk-in freezer, I sat between boxes of frozen hamburger patties and bags of vegetables while the temperature dropped hard enough to hurt my lungs. Every breath felt sharp. The cold bit through my jeans and settled into my spine. Emily sat beside me, shoulder pressed against mine. Both of us huddled against a rack of frozen fries like it could protect us from what was outside. I looked down and saw that her left pant leg was wet, not damp, soaked through from the knee down, dark, and clinging to her shin. I remembered the run across the parking lot, the way the ground had steamed in uneven patches, the cracks that hissed when we got close. She must have stepped into one of them. I had been too focused on getting us inside to notice. Emily. She followed my eyes down to her leg. The skin above her ankle was red and slick, shining under the freezer's overhead bulb. It looked like a bad sunburn at first. Then I saw the way the edges were starting to peel, white and papery, and I realized it was worse than that. "It barely hurts anymore," she said. That was the wrong thing for a burn to do. I pulled off my overshirt, the wrinkled employee shirt I had finally found that morning in a pile of laundry I should have washed a week ago. I wrapped it around her ankle as gently as I could, but she still flinched when the fabric touched her skin. I tied it off and pulled her against me, one arm around her shoulders, trying to share what little warmth we had left. "I'm sorry," I said. She tilted her head to look at me. "For what?" "For skipping work. If I'd been in the dish room where I was supposed to be, you wouldn't have run toward Old Faithful with that first aid kit. You wouldn't have been outside. You wouldn't—" "Shut up," she said. "I'm too tired to be mad yet." I shut up. We sat there and listened. I kept waiting for Beverly's voice outside the door, telling us the road was clear and the buses were coming. I waited for helicopter rotors, for the rumble of emergency vehicles, for the sound of engines that meant someone was still in control. All I heard was the soft tick of ice forming on the walls. The freezer was doing its job. The cold pressed in from every side, and I thought maybe that was enough. Maybe the returned couldn't reach us here. Emily's head settled against my shoulder. I closed my eyes. I fell asleep sitting upright, my back against a crate of frozen chicken breasts, Emily's weight warm against me even as the air turned brittle. I woke because the freezer was warm, not cold anymore. Warm, like someone had left the door open for hours. The boxes around me were sweating, cardboard softening at the corners, plastic bags slick with condensation. Water dripped from the ceiling in steady drops that smelled like pennies and wet stone. I sat up too fast and my head spun. Emily was standing at the door with her back to me. She was barefoot. Her shoes sat neatly beside the rack where we had been sitting, laces still tied. Her socks were folded on top of them. She stood perfectly still, her weight on both feet, her arms loose at her sides. Her skin shone as if she had just climbed from a bath. Steam rose faintly from her shoulders. "Emily?" She didn't answer. I looked down and saw the pool. It was round and blue, no bigger than a manhole cover, and it had opened through the freezer floor without cracking the concrete. The edges were smooth, like the floor had always had a hole there, and we just hadn't noticed. Emily's burned foot was planted in the center of it. The water came up to her ankle, perfectly still, perfectly clear. I could see all the way down into it, past her foot, past the white tile that shouldn't have been visible under the concrete, down into a depth that didn't make sense. "Emily, step back." She turned. Her eyes were clear and empty. Not glazed, not confused. Just empty, like someone had scooped out everything that made her her and left only the shape. Steam moved behind her teeth when she opened her mouth, slow and lazy, curling up past her lips. She smiled. Then she reached for the emergency release handle. "Don't," I said. She pressed it. The freezer door opened. The Snow Lodge kitchen was filled wall to wall with returned people standing in ankle-deep boiling water. The water didn't churn. It didn't bubble. It just sat there, flat and gray, steaming gently, while they stood in it like they were waiting for a bus. Their clothes hung wet and heavy. Their faces were slack. Some of them had mineral crust in their hair, white and chalky, like they'd been dunked in plaster. Others looked almost normal, except for the way their eyes didn't blink. Samuel stood near the industrial sink, his kitchen uniform still tucked in, his name badge still pinned to his chest, even though the plastic had warped into a curl. Deborah stood beside him, arms at her sides, her manager's shirt dark with water. Jeff was there, his hoodie soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead. Leah stood near the prep table, her right arm hanging at an angle that didn't look right. Beverly was closest to the freezer door, her ranger uniform dripping, the bear spray canister still clipped to her belt. Shane stood behind her, his work gloves gone, his hands red and peeling. Thomas was near the back, his driver's jacket open, steam rising from his collar. They all watched me. Emily stepped out of the freezer and into the water. It didn't splash. She moved through it like she was walking on tile, her bare feet silent, her wet hair clinging to her neck. She stopped just outside the door and turned back to face me. From the blue pool at her feet, I heard Emily's voice, the real one, faint, like it was coming from the bottom of a well, but unmistakably hers.
"Wade, don't let me go under."
The thing wearing her face smiled wider. It said my full name, Mark Gross, in Emily's voice, but wrong, like someone reading it off a script they didn't understand. It reached toward me. Behind her, Samuel took a step forward. Then Deborah. Then Jeff. Then all of them, moving through the boiling water without hurry, without sound, their eyes fixed on me like I was the only thing left in the world worth looking at. I didn't move. I couldn't. The freezer was warm now, warmer than the kitchen, and I realized the cold had been the only thing keeping me separate. The blue pool at Emily's feet rippled once, gently, and I heard her voice again, quieter this time, calling my name the way she used to when she'd find me hiding in the back hallway after I'd missed a shift. The thing that looked like her stepped closer. I stayed where I was. The door was open. The kitchen was full, and Emily's hand, wet and warm and wrong, reached through the doorway toward mine,